Before we get into the video, please consider subscribing, liking, and clicking the Discord link down below. Lots of cool stuff going on down there as we basically talk about nerd stuff and whatever else. That said, enjoy.
I got hairy legs that turn blonde in the sun, and the kids used to come up and reach in the pool and rub my leg down so it was straight, and then watch the hair come back up again.
What a stupid son of a bitch.
What's up, everyone? Gojin the Makai Phantom approaching ya. So, if you've been keeping up to date, you know that this year has been quite good to Kamen Rider. From Futo Pai finally getting an anime TV show adaptation, the usual family-friendly show with Geats, and their next response to Amazon writers being the adult reimagining of Kamen Rider Black. By the year 2019, just a little bit after The Last Judgment left theaters, they were in plans of making their next adult-themed writer show for the 50th anniversary of the series, but weren't so sure what exactly they wanted to do next. However, acclaimed filmmaker Kazuya Shiraishi would gain desire to hop on board this project after being told about it by Toei producer Taisuke Furuya, who wanted to get somebody with a name for the mature fans. Of course, just a distance after, another Toei producer, Shinichiro Shirakura, would ring up Kazuya-san to inform him they were remaking Kamen Rider Black. Kazuya had no prior experience in tokusatsu despite being a fan, so he'd watched the original Black beforehand and wanted to put focus on the dark themes and dynamic between Nobuhiko and Kotaro, keeping their history throughout the story while reimagining it through a realistic lens after noticing the potential of an adult-targeted Black series. He'd also get on board crew members he's seen as talented to give him a helping hand, such as Shinji Higuchi, who saw this as his chance to give his mature take on an old-school writer show, being he wasn't approached for the movie Anno is bringing to the screen next year, Shin Kamen Rider. Higuchi would then bring another tokusatsu veteran to help with the special effects work, Kyoka Taguchi, known for his work in the Ultra series, The Grudge 2, Gihara the Dark and Long-Haired Monster, Shudder, Godzilla, Super Sentai, and past Kamen Rider entries. Anyway, let's have a look at Kamen Rider Black Sun, and see why it's one of the best shows to recently come out. In the year 2022, half a century after the Kaijin, a group of mutant subhumans were granted equal rights. This wouldn't stop hate groups from taking charge and discrimination, though. However, young activist Ooi Izumi would not tolerate this, joining social movements and endorsing politicians to put an end to Kaijin hate. She would then meet up with two Kaijin who used to serve the political parties she originally endorsed, and turns out they ain't as well-meaning as they seem, while Kotaro's past demons come pay him a visit, particularly his old friend Nobuhiko. To get this out of the way first, I think I speak for most of the community when I say that Black Sun is exactly what a revival of an old-school classic should be. It keeps just enough recognizable while doing it in its own direction to make it stand out. It takes the appropriate elements from the original story and further darkens them for the demographic they're aiming for, alongside political messaging that shows off the dangers of extremes for both sides of the spectrum. No, I'm not talking about the autism spectrum. Oh, fuck it, it's the same thing. Have you seen Twitter? Holy shit! What I like about this reimagining is they took advantage of the iconic rivalry between friends the original Black had, but built from the ground up through a culture war environment to add weight of realism and thought-provoking overtones. Now you might ask, what does Black Sun do that separates its themes from the ones Amazon's provided? Basically, what Amazon's aimed for was showing the perspective for both sides. They have their well-meanings, but due to the convoluted nature of politics, there's an argument to be made for most things, thus exploring the darker aspects on how they can get carried away. What Black Sun goes for is similar in the way we got two rivals around a deeper meaning, but goes to a classical liberal point of view. By that, I mean we have the extreme right on the streets beating up minorities and advocating for their extermination just for being different. The radical left who aims to turn the tables by making the Kaijin the leading class and the genocide of humanity, still segregating them as a result. The corrupt government who tries to appeal to the progressive side but behind the scenes are doing shady crap for their own benefit. And the group of reason of the original members of Gorgom wanting actual equality between the groups where humans and Kaijin can live in harmony. The political conversations have that realism that reminds the viewer they're watching a work from Shinji Higuchi. It almost feels like a Shin reimagining, only with the gore and darker themes of Amazon writers. I'm sure many of you who've been watching Toku for as long as I have has thought to yourself quite a few times, why the fuck aren't the villains stopping these long-ass henshins? Like seriously, half the time while these dickheads are transforming, the villains can set up a tent, a fire, all before impregnating the entire fucking space-time continuum. Black Sun has answered this though, as Shadow Moon doesn't allow it and kicks his ass till he does it through combat. The show really reflects on how lackluster Hollywood been on delivering a message, as I actually felt emotional around what it was trying to say. Being the horrible shit neo-Nazis do, or what Hollywood is usually afraid of touching, the horrible shit leftists do. It really grounds this beloved story into reality, and I can't think of a way they could have furthered it without completely straying away from what made Black storytelling so immersive. Of course, doing what Black Sun is, the amount of episodes are nowhere near the OG's level, but the episodes themselves are twice as long. Now, that still doesn't equal the time it takes to finish Black, so trimming it down this much with a new hat on the original concept, there's gonna be some liberties like expansions to the main narrative. You're left wondering what said Kingstones the Kaijin seek are, but that's the point, because very few know what they are, and most of the info, like the food called Heaven is made out of, and what it can do, we keep coming back to learn more. The explanation is rational, and it doesn't disappoint, as these babies are what the Kaijin been trying to stop up to this point. They're what Kotaro been protecting, and they're what released Shadow Moon from his chained prison. They're multi-purposed. Every piece of the story connects to another in one way or more, and it leaves the product feeling rather connecting since there's no piece of filler to be found. Make no mistake, I love the episodic stuff as much as the next guy, and the original Black knew how to balance the weekly plots to the main story, but clearly Black Sun has one narrative to tell, and that's what it's working on each segment, so I commend them for this. If there's one thing to pick up from Black Sun, looking past the horrific imagery and dark storytelling it uses to present a message, it's love instead of hate.
どうして殺し合うんだろう。俺たちはどうして奪い合うんだろう。考えるな、秋月。俺たちが考えたって。
Because in the end, that just creates more, which is why we're stuck in this obnoxious culture war, because neither side has grasped this. I know there's a select group of people that are, oh, the politics here are so on the nose. But what I think they're failing to understand here is, that's not always a bad thing. First of all, if you made themes any less heavy-handled, it would change a fuck ton of the concept, as one of the aspects that makes it stand as a new show is the political coding it wraps around the existing story. Making that subtle, you might as well just remake Black with a few hints dropped in the pudding for the viewer to pick out themselves. At this point, you're literally criticizing it for existing. This is Tokusatsu, not your mom's booty hole getting wallered out by 47 dudes on a Saturday night. And second, this could be a relatively effective way to make a story have a heavier emotional impact, resembling terrifying events realistically while getting the message across more people. If you aren't convinced that this is showing the negatives to both sides, check this clip out and then come back to me.
お前は怪人だけの世界を望むんだな。
人間は劣等種族を排除してきた。その戦いに勝ち続けることで栄えてきた。勝利は学ぶべきだろう。
But Gojin, a 14-year-old girl shouldn't be speaking for human rights. She should be sucking my dick. This takes place half a century after Kaijins got equal rights to human beings. And there's loads of far-right groups trying to counter that and new political parties attempting to keep us divided. But the original side being oppressed at the top of the hill. If I was to criticize one thing, I guess I could mention there being a few forced lines of dialogue that just hits you on the nose. Like, I get it, the entire premise of this show requires explicit handling of politics, and in most cases, they did great. But in episode 1 and 2, some lines are a bit too direct.
差別するような店二度と来るから死ね
I get she's mad about discrimination, but it feels like if you couldn't tell what was going on was racism, they had to dumb it down in a few words for ya. But generally speaking, that's just a few minor bumps in the road of intelligently told narrative. Also, I want to make it clear, not everything is in blatant detail. Kotoro's living situation being something as small as a bus adds to the theme in a subtle way, whether or not you agree with the sentiment. Gorgon still has their secret occult vibe behind the scenes, but in the public eye behaves as well-meaning politicians that brings equality to all. Holy shit, Alex Jones was right. I knew these fuckers were lizards who drank the blood of children on Eppenstein's Island in the name of Satan. You know, if this guy's Eppenstein's dog sniffing out some ass, that answers a lot more questions than I'd like to admit. The ending nearly put a tear to my eyes, displaying all the people involved with this are only human and, like everyone else, are capable of becoming monsters of what they stood against. This takes what made Black's conclusion so effective on the hero and brings it down to everybody else. Which makes sense considering the tones behind it call for that. The political atmosphere is a dark place, and once you explore that rabbit hole, things get pretty convoluted and unsettling. Certain jokes might come off childish, the bird splat one being what comes to mind. While I'm not a fan of that type of comedy, and in most cases, there's no real joke to be made, in this scenario it was gift-wrapped and kinda clever given the situation of demi-human movements versus alt-right movements. But that's what I like about Black Sun. It's not just Amazons with a black skin. No, don't take that out of context. Amazons, while dark and serious 99% of the time, and the few giggles fit in were far in between, and those weren't even anything too outlandish. It takes a step up from Amazon's gritty nature, but also acknowledges with such a feel, it's good to have moments one can simply laugh or relax at. But in typical Kamen Rider fashion, they tend to be context for a serious point in the story that I'll try not to spoil much of, with the exception of out-of-context clips, where if you know, you know. I've seen my fair share of complaints for how it flip-flops between early 70s, early 2000s, and modern-day Japan, but for me, this format helped keep us invested. The development allows world building in current time to follow up with past scenarios, and after dialogue or so reveals something in the present, the past delves into it. It'd be a crime not to mention the perfect use of 70s clothing, just taking us back in time because it looks identical to that era. If you showed me that picture out of context of the crew together, I would immediately assume the photo was old by the presentation alone. What these flashbacks are good at also are, for lack of a better term, humanizing Gorgon. They generally meant well and fought for equality of the oppressed group, even giving us a sweet yet tragic love triangle between Nobuhiko, Kotaro, and Yukari. Reminding Nobuhiko he's still very much a human being, despite what society would lead you to believe. What helps is while the love story is old, it's forbidden, has that secret touch that in my opinion made it more immersive as she revealed her true colors to Kotaro, ultimately being the reason he's the man he is now. While Gorgon became their nemesis, it did shape them into who they are as both Nobuhiko and Kotaro used their old school training to help their young warriors get in gear. Yukari was the key to world peace, giving a message that's still spreading till this very day, and when Nobuhiko inevitably turns against Kotaro, she's used as an example that she wouldn't want this. Creating a world where Kaijin rule over humanity is the polar opposite of what she aimed for.
残したものを誰かに受け継ぐだけの歴史の通過点だから。
Actress Jun Izumi gives a genuine performance. She meant well and was the starting point to everyone else seeing the issue with their corporation that stuck around for decades later. And I think her calm demeanor makes the character and what she stands for more authentic. Kotaro and Nobuhiko are the two characters they absolutely had to get right. This is one of the most iconic rivalries of Japan, inspiring so many good stories. Thankful I am to inform you, they delivered far above what we were even demanding. Learning that Kotaro was the one to break from Gorgam gave him some guilt on his shoulders from it uses bits of dialogue to spark up our curiosity to later showing us the detail and specific that was being referred to. Nobuhiko is the way he is because he's got a grudge, and it's a reason on why he tends to go further than Kotaro once buttons are pushed. Their back and forth goes back to Jin and Haruka at the end of Amazon Season 1, but this time using it as a coding for an already iconic rivalry.
そんなところに座って創世王にでもなるつもりか。
そうだ。俺が創世王になって。
Acting shines here because it shows how different both of their journeys have led them to choose their own path. Nobuhiko is stoic with his tyrannic place as the Century King, and Kotaro somewhat charismatic knowing this is his last fight, but he's got something to do it for, so he doesn't mind. But there's more than just Kotaro and Nobuhiko. Kotaro doesn't have his sisters he usually hung around in the source material, but that's because while it's a reimagining of Kamen Rider Black's story, in some ways, it's almost like a continuation, considering Black ended where Kotaro was left a walking cyborg with nobody left to protect. That's sort of what happened here when he retreated Gorgam, but he finds new ones over time, mainly being the young activist Oi Izumi. We see Kotaro training her, raising the little girl to be that middle ground instead of going too far like the Kaijin movement did. But the learning's not solely on her. Their interactions are charming, as hanging with her begins to shape his views more as he goes on. And as he opens up to her over time, we learn about him just as much as she does. I love how he begins finding Oi annoying, but warms up to her at his own pace. It could go from getting on his nerves to a scene of smiles and laughter, and it's contagious because I couldn't help but smile with them. It's so sweet, you have to see it for yourself. As mostly, we're used to him being serious, and to his credit, he definitely captures the spirit of the original Black actor. But it's nice to see the character drift away from a miserable beast who's aggressive 24/7. She's the first person he's shown emotion for in years. He's basically her father figure to her. It's just incredible how the show can switch from horrific imagery and music to something heartwarming and adorable the next moment. This is why Oi has grown from a scared little girl who didn't know what to do in her situation, but thanks to Black Sun and everyone else around her, she's grown to be quite the badass. To be honest, I'd watch a spin-off series following her. She wants everybody treated equally and acknowledges the Kaijin can do just as wrong. In fact, she knows this better than anybody else, knowing what she's been through. What she stands against is segregation, and it is thanks to her Kaijin friend Shinosuke she learns to accept herself as still a human being, because it matches her morals that they're not really different. The young actress puts her little heart in the role where you feel like she cares about what she's talking about. Her speech in English highlights Kokoro Hirasawa's performance, with the Kamen tripping over herself, struggling between sentences, all coming across like there's no director behind the camera telling her, do it this way, or do this that way. All raw, uncut speech patterns you'd hear at an actual event like this put together by pure confidence.
Frightened by the shady nature of human beings, I am filled with hatred towards those who turn me into a kaijin.
Kujita learns just as much from her kind acts, because unlike some, she actually means well and led to Kujita being there to help her when Kotaro couldn't. Convos with Kotaro and Kujita are an icing on the cake. When we first themed them together, they were beating the shit out of each other, but now they're just sitting down in the sun chatting like old friends. Gorgam aren't left undeveloped either. Like any modern writer show, we get a glimpse on the villains and the plan they've got cooking up. We don't sympathize with all of them or anything, but it does give us a reason to see Gorgam more than just as the series villain, which luckily is an ongoing theme for the series. I guess it can also be compared to what we got of them in the original show, with their plan to awaken the Creation King, only with the Monster of the Week element removed. Belgenia, who does all the torture, everything about him screams vile, from his calm performance during these horrible tasks and all around what he's willing to do to further his goals. You just know he doesn't give one fuck about what he's doing to these people and is mentally numb to the process where you want to smack him just for being able to smile. But not even he's beyond redemption. He's an example of how you can begin hating somebody to liking them, because he didn't see his own wrongs till experiencing the coup from Shadow Moon. So sympathy is formed to Aoi after realizing the horrible things he'd done. You no longer hate this guy, you want Aoi to forgive him just because he's trying to do better. Sometimes people just need their actions to bite them in the ass, which is exactly what we're seeing here. But on the other hand, you can also see Aoi's frustration after what he took. But then again, the actress' lighter demeanor has shown her to soften up on him a bit.
いつかあんたを殺す。それは変わんないから。
Which makes sense, given the fact she had no choice but to work with him, so his attempts at doing better she gets to see for herself. There is a working romance Nobuhiko gets with High Priestess Bisham, played by Yo Yoshida. I personally think this spiced up the situation more, as everyone else was pretty much his bitch, while her, on the other hand, not necessarily his equal, has the most talks with him about planning out their attacks and exchanging information. But as harsh as her end was, she saw every move Kotaro and Nobuhiko shared and learned from them, leaving us an end that could mean one of three possibilities in the upcoming sequel. 1. She reformed herself, deciding to return the Gorgon party to what they once stood for. 2nd, she's out for revenge, knowing Aoi killed Nobuhiko and the Creation King. Or 3rd, she somehow took some of the Creation King's power, which would explain what she was doing near the end, and that talk she had with Nobuhiko.
ストーンを手にソーセオの前に立ったあの時、ソーセオの体に私の意志が入っていく感覚になった。
So those already bitching about the series won't notice, but simple analysis of her reactions displays a similar empathy to Nobuhiko on his last breaths. Donami is straight up diabolical. Best way to describe Black Sun is kinda anti-Shin, being at least in the Godzilla movie's case, and similarly the Ultraman one with a team instead of a real-life government. They were supposed to humanize the politicians to show us the stress these people go through during their job. Here, we were shown the realism, but instead of the humanization those movies gave, with the exception of the past development, we witnessed the corruption and what goes on behind the fake political advertisements we're constantly fed. Donami's attack on Oliver is a perfect representation to back this statement up, as since he advocates for equality, that makes him Gorgon's enemy. Huge props to the actor truly displaying the two-faced nature of a politician, seeing as he can be mean-spirited and cunning behind the scenes, but in the public eye, a charitable old man. Which, dear lord, this makes when his entire world falls apart so much more satisfying, especially considering he goes out like a complete bitch, and you are straight up rooting for them to take him down.
覚えてる？お前なんか知らん。
Help! I need an adult! I can't help but think how great the Creation King looks. The effect they use on that giant bug mutant is just astounding, even if it doesn't do much outside of little facial expressions. If you're unfamiliar with the lore of Kamen Rider Black, let me explain. He's essentially the god of all kaijin, being he's given extreme force power and the creator above all, with only 2 with potential to reach his level. The power of the Creation King is shown in all that talk, making the use of awakening him with the Kingstone supernatural-esque that even Gorgon struggles with. You almost feel sorry for him because as powerful as he is, he's not particularly evil. That's why we get the scene of him in the past stopping a young Kotaro and Nobuhiko to pat their heads, which was surprisingly wholesome. There's so much I can spoil about him, but personally, I'd rather you experience it for yourself. All I'll say is his origin is tragic and actually pretty fucked up. His beating heart is insane. It's absolutely massive, yet beats at the pace of the real thing with some of the fleshiest detail I've ever seen. The heart itself also making a cool yet gruesome reference to the Creation King's appearance in the 80s show. I love that they used a different effect for the Creation King then and now. It shows the fact it's aged and gotten stronger as time passed, with its size representing that. And oh my god, I have to say, some of the things they managed to accomplish straight up impressed me. I love Amazon Riders, and generally with use of camera angles, they made stuff like feasting on human flesh convincing without doing stuff to bring out teeth. Here, on the other hand, Black Sun legitimately opens his fucking mouth, and the CGI used to do it with such a smooth enhancement you'd think it was a part of the suit. Now, being a web series, you'd think the digital effect would stick out like a sore thumb, but in reality, for the little that are used here, especially on the digitally enhanced practical effects, they're actually very hard to tell. Take the Mantis, for example. On one hand, we got a heavily detailed suit that's fairly agile, but to work for her motif and the action sequences, it needed quality CGI to put it at high speed, and looking like it's actually there because it is. Proof how good the effects are is they don't look any less convincing when bits show up in human form, since you see them as just a part of their body. Another thing I've seen people point out is not every suit is on par with Black Sun, Shadow Moon, or the Creation King, but is that really fair to bring up? You gotta remember, a big reason shows like Kamen Rider or Super Sentai tend to have a cheesy reputation in the West is the fact each series has loads of different suits and visuals crafted for them, all on a budget and schedule far smaller than something like Godzilla, where they have much less to create. Black Sun being shorter is able to make a lot of the important kaijin look nearing film level, but those in the background, corners are gonna have to be cut like a Monster of the Week from one of the other shows, and even then, they still look pretty good for what they are. It's like criticizing an open world game for certain aspects being fuzzy. That comes with the property, and I don't know what you were expecting. The kaijin all have their own style of transforming into their subhuman form, and they can be extremely grotesque and graphic, carrying that blend of the traditional fast tension from the majority and the slow body horror type you'd find in the original Shin Kamen Rider from the year 1992. Same can be said for the riders themselves. Their combat is just as tribalistic, and there's plenty of ripping and tearing from teeth and claws, but it's mixed in between of the martial arts to deliver, once again, a perfect blend of both. The riders here are basically just unevolved versions of the Creation King. That explains why with the Kingstones, Black Sun and Shadow Moon grow into more powerful forms till eventually transitioning to a full-on god. Probably one of my favorite explanations for a rider carrying multiple sets of evolutions, just for the touch on the lore alone. This is also why the twist around the ending works so much other than simply reusing the old suit from the 70s flashbacks. Black Sun and Shadow Moon are dope. First forms resemble monsters from a body horror flick, but the context for this choice is for good reason, since it's nothing but an unevolved form. So when we come down to the recognizable yet still edgy redesigns, they're earned. The smoking aura around Nobuhiko's henshin gives off a sense of power like the partner you originally sided with has become the biggest threat, and the score around it is dripping awesome sauce. They literally recreated the henshin sequence of Shadow Moon's arrival in the first show once he discovered his full power, and it's absolutely badass. I can't even put it to justice by just describing it. The final fight in Black found its way in a new and improved skin as well. Only instead of lightsaber things, they rip each other's fucking limbs off to use as swords. It's brutal and has to be seen to be believed with the crazy shit they brought to screen. These two are equals, and you really feel like that with the use of tables turning. It's accurate to what the classic's shown us, but its modern, gory take makes it have its own form of intensity. On the topic of gore, they outdo Amazons. That's right. Amazon Riders, a show you've seen limbs get ripped off others, hearts eaten, and every necessary disgusting detail to make my sister sick. Black Sun doubles it. It's certainly not for the faint of heart, but god damn, it can add a much appreciated spice to the action sequences, coming out with some very creative fatalities, I may add. Just how the blood splurts on the camera during Black Sun's mission to execute the Creation King immerses us in the carnage, mainly because it's shot from below Kotaro, which as a whole, they're all fantastically filmed thanks to the talented work of Kazuya Shiraishi. Shadow Moon vs. the Pterosaur Kaijin is done through a higher angle to show off her techniques, but only enough to give equal perspective in the combat. But the stunning choreography doesn't stop through action sequences. Every single political conference is filmed just like the real thing shot on television with a few normal shots sprinkled around. Even how it zooms in on activist groups for their protests. I feel like I'm watching something from the news. It's a really good back and forth between cinematic television and journalistic camera angles. Just look at that scene with the dude roaming the forest and Shadow Moon appears out in the background. It's such a subtle moment with no additional noise added in between. It low-key gave me goosebumps, at points mimicking a style only seen prior in the Showa era. Another example would be the redo of the opening by Tetsuo Kurata. Capturing the original so much, my brother literally walked in asking why we were rewatching Black. Some people wish this was throughout the show, but I disagree, since it's more surprising as a result, especially since it's used as a piece of the story, being what leads up to his fight with Shadow Moon. And I can't forget to compliment how they messed with the lighting to resemble an 80s show, with the writing on the screen just as much. Composer Kenta Matsukuma seems to have taken a page out of Shido Saigusu's book for some of his work. The scenes silent of dialogue mainly what comes to mind, as they alone for the mess of events going around the climate, which they have their own power to them since it puts a full focus on the score and the imagery present, usually involving a big event. And there's just an atmosphere to be offered from the score on scenes like when Oi is forced to put the king stones together. It's introspective as there's two big things going on at once and it manages to work for both. Around the end with the whale kaijin Kujira in the water as he's clearly doing what he could to treat Black Sun in his weakened state, capturing just enough emotion to tell what's about to happen is serious. But the magic here is one thing: diversity. One of the core aspects that separate Black Sun from Amazons is there's plenty of softer moments to give the viewer a safe space from the horrific imagery and heavy storytelling. It makes you forget about what's happening in a good way. The scenes are clearly there to let us off from what's going on in the world. There is one track to highlight here. I have to say it is Beautiful Girl with the triangle between Yukari, Kotaro, and Nobuhiko. Mainly because it's so comforting. It legit brought a shiver down my spine. Hell, it got me teary-eyed. But that's because due to this being in the past, you know that there is a tragic end to how this goes, as beautiful as it is. I'd recommend you put on some earbuds, close your eyes, and watch how fast your mood swings. It's that powerful. When Kotaro discovers the Creation King, it screams of adventure, capturing the end of a long journey someone been going on for years. Particular track works is they've been seeking to take this deity down with Yukari since the 70s, so it really captures that epic feel of a long-awaited destination. And finally, I'd like to congratulate Chogakuse for making their big break as a band for the series opening Did You See the Sunrise? It concludes the episodes on a truly exciting note that just hearing it is enough to realize what's coming next is gonna be an adrenaline rush. Kamen Rider, ma Kamen, Kamen Rider, I considered making this its own video, but I'm not sure how long I can drag this topic out to full length, so I just decided to include it as a segment of this one, but maybe I'll eat my words. Let's find out. So the ending of Kamen Rider Black Sun has been polarizing to say the least, sparking up discussion if this is working up to Kamen Rider Black Sun RX. Personally, I'm gonna have to say yes. However, it would be following Aoi in a further evolution, and to be honest, I wouldn't oppose that. It would make a lot more sense than the original, as to my understanding, Kotaro was unreasonably different in RX after Black's nihilistic ending. Meanwhile, Black Sun's conclusion is close to that of the original, as Aoi basically lost everything to keep peace around society. But the war isn't over yet. The Creation King is dead, and Ooi has taken off from what Kotaro taught her and raised her own rebellion to fight back against a few members of Gorgom left. And she learned how to control her powers with a belt to assist her strength. She's probably gonna be the next writer, and to be honest, I'm all for it. I don't see a reason not to follow her. She's the only one who's been working under him, and clearly, by the end, she's come a long way. Plus, it would make more sense out of the general name, Black RX, being that she is the successor to Black. Well, first off, in the 90s version, that would simply be a form, considering it's the same hero, only upgraded, but nope. He had an entire name change, considering the multiple forms he has gained, which, funny enough, may have actually been the first Kamen writer to have different gimmicks. Correct me if I'm wrong. Here, on the other hand, Aoi is Kotaro's successor, so it makes sense why she would be a similar kaijin, but not straight up identical. Me, I'm curious how they'll adapt it. Hopefully, they'll take many of the core elements of the original series, while wrapping it in a similar coding they did with the 87 classic to make it its own unique experience, while still being recognizable in its own way. Remember in Black RX when Kotaro met the other writers to predate his existence? Well, this might be their chance to bring in Haruka, the upcoming Shin Kamen writer, or straight up new ones to throw in the mix in preparation for any other mature reimagining Amazon and Toei got in store for us. That little army she's drafting may as well be a connection to that for all I know. Guess only time will tell. You all know Amazon writers, but this is actually the 4th adult-aimed reimagining of an old-school show in the series. First is 1992's Shin Kamen Rider Prologue that became a part of the main timeline, and Kamen Rider the First based on the manga to the original Kamen Rider, though it is only the second to be distributed by Amazon Prime. Just like the 80s version, it would air in October for the horror elements. Whether or not this was intentional, I don't know, since the dates aren't identical. As a part of the build-up to the series, Bandai made a successful crowdfunding campaign for the remake of the 1987 DX-TV Power Henshin belt called the DX Henshin Belt Kingstone. Shinda Kuda would acknowledge the existence of America's failed attempt at Kamen Rider during his interview with Variety, jokingly saying it's Toei's revenge for Saban's Maxed Riders. Cause last attempt with our good friend the AK didn't go well, I guess. The Secretary General would be played by Minori Todada, who previously played Yubei Sonozaki, aka the Terror Dopant in Kamen Rider Double, Amagi Kurishima and Gan Gaiden Zangetsu, plus Muska in Studio Ghibli's Castle in the Sky and multiple Ultra series. This may have slipped over your nose if you're not familiar with Kamen Rider Black. When Donami is scrolling through the Kaijin, you've seen exact photos of suits of the 1987 classic. Last, but certainly not least, Black Sun turned Gojin the Makai Phantom into a filthy blue-haired feminist. Dude, I literally forgot to give the name to every fucking male actor here. What the fuck? Well, boys, time to pack up Kamen Rider. We're moving on to bigger and gayer things like Aquaman. Anyway, to make up for that tomfoolery, I'll name them now. Kotaro is played by Hidetoshi Nishijima, who recently also played Kimio Tamuda from Shin Ultraman. Nobuhiko is played by Tomoya Nakamura, Belgenia Takahito Miyuta. I was surprised by how good Kamen Rider Black Sun turned out. I was expecting great. I already love Amazon's Black, and just the overall concept of adult-themed writer has always been my jam. Now, if you're on the squeamish side, it may turn you off with its heavily detailed gore and accurate depictions of violence, some referencing actual tragedies like Imperial Japan, 731, Zenkyoto, or the George Floyd incident. But that's a part of what makes it so effective. There's a misconception political themes need to be subtle, but that isn't always the case. Explicit handling can make for a very in-depth story, not to mention giving the gore more value than simple Mortal Kombat goodness, which is here and I absolutely loved it, but I appreciate the realism too. Please, if you can, support the official release on Amazon Prime. I heard at first a lot of people in the States had issues getting it to work, but it should be fine now. If you can't, then check it out whatever way you so choose. You won't regret it. It's an incredible entry that managed to surpass my already high expectations. I might even like it more than the original, I don't know. 87 is really, really good. and I respect what they did, but Black Sun perfected that story. If not, then it sure as hell equaled it. I have to rewatch it once the Blu-ray is out, so we'll see. That said, I'm gonna award Kamen Rider Black Sun a phenomenal 10 out of 10 stars. It's beyond legendary and tells a more than effective narrative that's just as powerful for real-life issues, but still can be enjoyed through escapism. Anyway, I got plenty of more Kamen Rider content on the way, so please stay tuned for those and whatever else we got cooking up down here. And if you enjoyed this video, smash that like button, share it around, and subscribe. Make sure to hit that bell for notifications to keep up to date on all my future content. And also check me out on social media and all tech. Links are in the description down below. This is Gojin the Makai Phantom, leaving the building.